After 3 years and 50,000 miles of ownership, how has my VW ID4 First Edition held up? Is it reliable? Am I selling it? Let's find out. One of the things I was most concerned about when buying the ID4 is that the interior wouldn't hold up over time. That's because my ID4 has the special First Edition space gray interior with a lot of off-white accents and other light colored trim pieces. I've never had the car deep cleaned, and I'm sure you'll see some blemishes in the video, but I'm pleasantly surprised and impressed just how good the interior still looks. For example, you won't find any signs of notable wear or damage to the seats. They look brand new. You can say the same thing for the door panels and most everywhere else. This is despite the ID4 being a daily commuter car that has been constantly exposed to chemicals like sunscreen, hairspray, bug spray, and all sorts of things that are known to damage vinyl-based interiors. Another indicator of the ID4's build quality is that it still hasn't developed any rattles or other undesirable noises. When it comes to comfort and cabin space, though it's about 4 or 5 inches shorter than most of the competition at 180 inches long, the ID4 has plenty of headroom and legroom for both the front and second row passengers. This is because VW pushed the electronics into the front trunk area, which gives the front row passengers more legroom. There's no transmission tunnel hump in the second row, and the roofline isn't as aggressively teardrop shaped as it is on other electric vehicles. We've had passengers sit in the back who are over 6 feet tall for a few hours at a time, and they had no complaints. The seats themselves are moderately cushioned and supportive, and if you're thinking about buying an ID4, I highly recommend the vinyl seating option. That's because the vinyl seats breathe so much better, and they are much easier to keep clean. Both front seats are 12-way power adjustable, including lumbar support. You can save profiles, and they now have easy entry. Now let's talk about the HVAC system. You have 2 front zones that can be independently controlled with physical vents that can be completely closed off if your passenger doesn't want air blowing on them. There are also a couple of manually controlled vents in the back. Unfortunately, ID4s sold in the US do not include a heat pump option, so heating the cabin during the wintertime is going to be a bit more inefficient. On the flip side, the AC blows cold air within seconds of starting up, even on the hottest summer days. Speaking of the hottest summer days, I have to mention the electric sunshade because it's one of my favorite features. It keeps the seats from getting scalding hot when you're parked outside, and it makes it so your AC doesn't have to work quite as hard to keep the cabin cool. As far as the steering wheel goes, there are areas of discoloration. Of course, I didn't help matters much when I scratched it with some rental car keys. Otherwise, it fits comfortably in your hand, it has some stitching to help it look more premium, and the heating option makes it feel nice and toasty in the winter too. Behind it is a 5-inch driver display that's attached to the steering column. The screen is decently modern, if not simplistic, and it does offer some limited customizations, but outside the speedometer, of course, the most useful thing you're going to see is the battery's charge level and your estimated remaining range. I actually find it to be quite accurate, assuming that your driving is consistent, whether that's on the highway for a road trip or if your daily commute is the same every day. Moving down the dashboard, the second display in the First Edition is a 12-inch horizontally oriented screen for the infotainment system and vehicle controls. While it's large and bright enough to make viewing and controlling apps easy, the software side doesn't hold up its end of the bargain, but we're going to come back to this later. For cabin storage, the First Edition center console includes exposed cup holders with a removable tray, a decently sized compartment with a sliding cover that includes additional cup holders that can be adjusted, and relatively large door pockets that are lined with a felt-like material which keep rattles to a minimum. As far as nitpicks go, you guys already know I don't like the gloss black surfaces because they're hard to keep clean. But my biggest complaint goes to the touch-sensitive buttons that can be found on things like the steering wheel, the infotainment system, the overhead cabin controls, and the driver's door panel. It's just too easy to turn something on that you don't want to, or ironically, they have the opposite problem, they're unresponsive. As an example, when I go to roll down my window, I always accidentally touch the rear button, which activates the rear windows instead, and everyone gets a laugh out of it every time. Overall, I certainly appreciate the clean and modern feel of the interior. Sure, it's a mix of hard and soft touch plastics and not the most upscale of the bunch, but the cabin is spacious, comfortable, and not as bare bones as some. And I'm a sucker for some ambient lighting. When it comes to cargo, the ID4 offers 30.3 cubic feet of rear storage capacity with the back seats up and 64.2 cubic feet with them down. And there's a small sub-trunk area where you can store tools and charging accessories. Moving to the outside, the ID4 is one of the best looking crossover EVs on the market in my opinion. The glacier white metallic paint doesn't show any signs of peeling or damage, though I have depopulated some of our local bugs, as you can tell. One reason the paint has probably stayed in such great shape is because of this plastic molding that extends around the entire vehicle. It covers the parts of the car that are most likely to be hit by rocks, dirt, and debris. This plastic is quite tough and doesn't show much damage itself. Sadly, I have gotten my fair share of dings over the years, and I wish the ID4 had something like Sentry Mode to record these events. Moving to the front, the ID4 has these large matrix LED headlights that get really bright, including automatic high beams that work exactly the way that you expect. There are also these cornering lights which help illuminate the sides of the road when you're turning the vehicle. Moving along, I want to call out the large side view mirrors, which weren't compromised for efficiency purposes. This makes a big difference in daily driving. These mirrors are electronically controlled, include a heating option. They don't, however, fold automatically based on location, which is a bit of a bummer. I will add these LED indicators on the back provide a nice touch of luxury. Below them are the aerodynamic door handles, which might have the best design of the bunch. You simply reach under the cover and squeeze the pad to open the door. The keyless entry system and the proximity unlock features work perfectly, but there's not a proximity lock feature, so you have to put your finger on the indentation to lock the doors. On the back, I love the futuristic looking light bar that extends the entire width of the liftgate. You can option the liftgate to be fully powered, including a hands-free feature, but I find it to work very inconsistently, so I just push the button instead. The optional tow hitch allows rear-wheel drive ID4s to pull up to 2,200 pounds and all-wheel drive configurations to pull 2,700 pounds. I'm going to get to the tires in another section, but just know I do recommend switching the OEM tires out for something else. There are only two build quality issues worth calling out. The plastic light bar in the back where the logo is doesn't quite fit where it's supposed to, and you can push it in with your hand from time to time. The second one is the front passenger door sticks out ever so slightly at the bottom. It's so minor though, you probably can't even tell in the video. Everything else on the outside of the ID4 fits together and works the way that it should, and its exterior build quality and durability match its interior. The first edition ID4 has an EPA estimated 250 miles of range. Despite this, it has been a perfect commuter vehicle. It handles extended drives just fine, and it can certainly be a road trip capable car, assuming you're traveling somewhere with good charging infrastructure. When it comes to real-world efficiency, unfortunately, the ID4 doesn't provide lifetime data, but over the last 13,000 miles or so, I've been getting 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is just above the EPA estimated 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour. Of course, speed, weather conditions, and other factors can make a big difference in how efficient your EV is. And if you're curious about battery degradation, this can be really hard to measure, but here's some information from a recent fast charging session I did. However, keep in mind, not all of the energy delivered from these charging stations goes directly into the battery pack. My takeaway from this is, though I'm sure my battery pack's capacity has been reduced, it's so minimal that on a daily basis, I can't tell the difference, and that's all that really matters. I do most of my charging at home using the included cable, which adds about 3 miles of range per hour. While this sounds slow, it's actually enough to cover the average American's daily commute of 40 miles if you remember to plug in each night. But because I already had this 240 volt outlet at home, a couple of years ago I actually ended up buying a level 2 charger off of Amazon made by a company called SplitVolt. I mostly use this equipment during the wintertime when efficiency drops by 30 to 40%, or if I take a really long weekend drive and need that extra juice for Monday morning. Depending on the method you choose, level 2 charging at home can increase speeds by 5 to 10x, but not everyone needs this. On the road, I've mostly been exclusively charging with the Electrify America network. That's because my ID4 came with 3 free years of charging on this network, which ultimately saved me over $1,000 in charging fees after using nearly 4,000 kilowatt hours of energy. When it comes to public fast charging, the ID4 can only use CCS-based networks at this time, except for a small amount of Tesla supercharger locations that have both the software and adapters enabled. However, by the end of 2025, VW Group EVs will get access to many supercharger locations thanks to a new partnership with Tesla. This will be game-changing. I will say that networks like EVgo, ChargePoint, and Electrify America have gotten so much better in terms of reliability and the number of locations that they offer. Do I still run into technical issues and availability problems? Absolutely, but charging truly hasn't been as much of a headache as it's often portrayed to be. This includes charging times as well. It takes the ID4 roughly 30 to 40 minutes to charge from 10% to 80% capacity at a public fast charging station. And yes, this is certainly longer than it takes to pump up your car with gas. Most of these charging stations are located at places where you can get out, stretch your legs, and use the restroom if you need to. If you're wondering about accessories, at this point, the only one I would really recommend outside of a level 2 charger if you need it is an adapter that will allow you to plug in to Tesla destination chargers, which are commonly found at places like hotels that often allow their guests to charge for free. This can save you a good amount of money if you travel a lot. I have one called Tesla Tap, which has been around for a few years and was highly recommended by others, but you can find additional options on Amazon. In summary, I'm very happy with the ID4's real-world range performance versus what's advertised. The public charging experience has gotten so much better, and it's going to improve exponentially next year when the ID4 gains access to the Tesla supercharger network. EVs are advertised to have fewer maintenance needs, which will help you save money over the long term. Certainly, that's been the case with my ID4 so far. After a little more than 50,000 miles on the odometer, I spent roughly $1,500 on maintenance and expect that number to decrease. Here's why. The vast majority of this expense was replacing the tires, especially the back tires, which only lasted 15,000 miles or so. This is due to both the weight of the vehicle and because my ID4 is rear-wheel drive and all that power gets pushed through the back axle. On top of this, the ID4 comes with a staggered tire setup, as the back tires are wider than the front. Because of this, you can't rotate the rear tires to the front and vice versa. So when it became time to switch them out, I ended up going with the Michelin Cross Climate 2s, which are an all-season tire with a lot more tread life. Though I was initially a bit hesitant because reviews online said they could reduce range and increase tire noise. Luckily, this has not been the case at all. 35,000 miles later, they're still going strong, and since they cost the same as the OEM tires, I plan on using the Michelin Cross Climate 2s for the rest of my ownership. Other than this, the only other out-of-pocket expenses have been to replace the wiper blades and the cabin filter. I have been to the VW dealership 4 times for service, twice for a recall related to the door handles, once for a general inspection, and the last time was to get a software update and a 12-volt battery replacement. And when it comes to reliability, the ID4 has been perfect. It has never failed to drive or charge, including in very hot or very cold conditions. It really doesn't get any better than that. If you've seen my other videos, then you know, one of my biggest gripes about the ID4 is the software both in the vehicle and the mobile app just aren't very good. It was 2.5 years before the car ever got a software update, and I had to take the vehicle into the dealership to have it done. What's the software like now? Well, it's better in some ways, unchanged in others, but includes new issues as well. The infotainment screen itself, while still notably unresponsive at times, has improved in daily use as the system gets warmed up after a few minutes. One of the most annoying new features, though, is that VW implemented this profile screen, which is helpful if you do have multiple people who drive your car with drastically different settings. But if it's still just one person, you have to hit OK every time you get into the car, at which point then you can interact with the infotainment system. One positive I can call out is that the mobile app will connect to the vehicle more reliably than it used to, and there are some new options like being able to adjust your charging limit, though there still isn't a way to lock and unlock the car remotely. The ID4 does come with wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support, and they work well when there aren't connectivity issues. The screen does offer a limited amount of customizations where you can choose from preset templates and widgets, but you aren't going to find any fancy features here like a Sentry mode, dog mode, or the ability to watch Netflix while you're charging. As far as the sound system goes, most ID4s only come with a basic 7-speaker setup. It's fine, certainly nothing to write home about. If you listen to music in your car a lot, you're going to want to get the Pro S Plus trim, which has a 10-speaker Harman Kardon system, which should be much better. The software update did come with one more notable new feature, but I'm going to talk about that in the next section. To answer the question, has the software improved? I would say marginally, but I can also confidently say it's still the worst in its class. The good news is VW and Rivian just announced a joint venture together, and Rivian's software is probably the second best in the industry behind Tesla. So in a few years, perhaps VW EVs are going to have much better software. The ID4 offers a great driving experience depending upon what you're looking for. You sit relatively high up, meaning it feels more like a traditional crossover versus some of the competition that are more like tall sedans. My rear-wheel drive ID4 goes 0 to 60 in 7 seconds. Acceleration is incredibly smooth. You don't ever feel like you're getting too much power. And unlike some of the competition, the ID4 still lets you turn regen braking off if you want to. And with the last software update, now once you come to a complete stop and auto hold is activated, you no longer have to keep your foot on the brake. But unfortunately, the ID4 still lacks true one-pedal driving, as you have to use the physical brakes to come to a complete stop before the feature will kick in, otherwise it will continue to roll forward. Heading back to the positives, the ID4 suspension is a good mix between not too stiff, but also not bouncy at all. And despite its weight and the size of its tires, ride quality is above average for the class. The vehicle has a tight turning radius, which makes it easy to maneuver in urban environments. There are also some customizable drive modes, but the only difference I can really tell between them is that the steering will go from soft to stiff. Visibility is quite good, with average-sized A-pillars, those large side view mirrors I mentioned before, and a decent view at the back. The quality of the backup camera is good enough, but I definitely prefer the wide-angle view versus the default view. Frustratingly, you can't change which one's the default. Features like auto high beams, auto wipers, and blind spot monitoring consistently work the way they should. The ID4 does offer front and rear collision warnings, as well as automatic emergency braking, which have come in handy more times than I can count. In terms of self-driving software, it will steer the vehicle for you on the highway and keep your speed using adaptive cruise control. It's fairly limited, and there are situations it can't handle, like really curvy roads or construction zones. One last topic I want to cover is cabin noise. So I did a quick unscientific test where I took a Model Y and my ID4 and drove them at highway speeds at roughly 70 miles per hour. I recorded 67 decibels in the Model Y and around 71 decibels in the ID4. While the difference is significant, the ID4's measurement is what would be considered average for a vehicle driving at highway speeds, and I wouldn't consider the cabin loud at all. Knowing what I know now, I still would have bought the ID4 back in 2021, but the market today is completely different. And that brings us to the first question: would I still recommend it to others? And the answer is maybe. One of the ID4's best selling points is its price. The ID4 qualifies for the full $7,500 federal tax credit. So if you do as well, you can get a well-equipped ID4 for under $40,000 or so. If you're looking for a crossover EV that has relatively large storage capacity in the back, is comfortable for a daily driver, that has a traditional design, and has driver's assistance and safety features that you've probably come to expect, with decent range and charging speeds, then the ID4 might be for you. But if you're looking for a vehicle that's more performance-oriented, that goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and you're not okay with dealing with mostly minor but frequent software bugs on a daily basis, then the ID4 might not be for you. And to answer the second question, do I plan on selling my first edition ID4? And the answer is not anytime soon. That's because the ID4 has earned my trust from both a build quality and reliability perspective. And as long as that continues to be the case, I'm willing to overlook the software issues. If you haven't already, be sure to watch my ID4 tips videos and check out my website, evhelphub.com, for more ID4 and electric car ownership content. Thank you so much for watching.